Hi guys, my name is Katrina. Let me start by saying that while my husband's GoPro is great for his skateboarding, it is not providing quite the detailed image of my entire project back here at once as I would have liked, so my apologies. In case you did not get a chance to read my essay, I'm just going to briefly tell you that I am a biology major on hiatus, raising my two little daughters, and we spend quite a lot of time at home because, as you can imagine, not the easiest thing to get two toddlers out here and there as easily as you would freely by yourself, right? So what I wanted to do with my project was, first of all, overcome my fear of painting. I really wanted to focus on painting, but I also wanted to bring in images to my home that could surround us with joy and make our home a larger world when we can't get out and about and be part of it. I was actually recommended this class by a friend just to do something for myself, and I was a little apprehensive at first to take a class that was going to grade me on my artistic capabilities because it had been so long since I had done any of the fine arts. I love singing, I'm always writing poetry, but it's the fine arts that have kind of kept me at bay because I've never had confidence in my artwork. And I think that the lack of confidence kind of inhibits us from our true potential. And I just wanted to start with some of the journal entries for this class so you can see where I started. Again, apologize if there's any shakiness in the video because I am going to go from image to image from my project back here just so I can explain to you what they mean. Our first journal entry, I believe, was our inner critic. As you can see, it's not very detailed, kind of scribbly. That is how I felt, couldn't define it. So I just started with pencil, and then I moved on to our image of the artist and the healer, crayon, which is kind of convenient because it looks like my toddler can draw, and she draws pretty well. Then I braved colored pencil for our What is Your Essence project. We have the caffeine molecule up there, just some basic elements for building blocks of life. So I'm getting kind of into my science background here. I love galaxies, so I threw a nebula up here. I have the constellation for Cancer, that's my zodiac sign. Anyway, started adding some details. Moved on to what are our obstacles. Trying a little bit of pencil, colored pencil here. Mine was just about having a problem between going with the flow and making a decision, and when I go to make a decision, I don't know what decision to make. I've only ever done one other portrait in my life, and so when I did my self-portrait, I actually was pretty happy with it. Shading not so great, but I'm okay with that. And this kind of will lead me into my project. The mandala journal was the first time I picked up the paint, and I actually used gouache. I had never used any other paint type than acrylic, so I wanted to start with something in between before I moved on to watercolor, and gouache is in between. Some people say oil and watercolor, or acrylic and watercolor. So I actually found that I quite liked gouache, and it was a good place to start before moving on to watercolor. Anyhow, for my project, again, I wanted to tackle my fear of painting, bring myself back to art, and wanted to create images that would surround me and my family with joy. So I'm going to move the camera here. First one, Love Flowers. And this was a bouquet my husband brought home for me. And it just symbolizes the little things that he does for me and the love he has for me. The next one I did was for our spirit animal project. Looked at a live image online, sketched, and briefly dabbled in the paint. And this is still gouache. I haven't had a lot of practice with spirit animals, but when I have, it's always been an elephant, so I figured I'd like to see this image daily so I can remind myself to maybe work with the characteristics and power and properties of the elephant. The next I did is gouache still, and this is an image of a cactus my best friend had at her house before she moved to Sicily, and just having this around reminds me of her. And here I mixed kind of a portrait and played around with some paints. Not the best portraiture, but I am happy with this because this is my little baby Adeline, and this is my eldest daughter Sophia. No explanation as to why I would love having that around. This I kind of combined with the music project and the intuitive painting. And so I listened to music while I was painting, and the orange, I was listening to some Led Zeppelin. The green, a little bit of Flogging Molly and a band or a group called Makem and Clancy. It's a traditional Irish folk band. Reminds me of my grandfather. And the purple is when I was listening to my favorite group, Shaky Graves. So I, again, love music, love singing, and these were the emotions I was feeling when I was listening to the music and just painting freely and intuitively. So I'm moving on to my first watercolor ever in my life. I stayed in my safe zone and used flowers. It's a little rough with what you'd expect to see with watercolor. You kind of want to see soft edges, but for my first watercolor painting, I am okay with that, and it brings me joy. Next one I did a little bit of sketching and then used all watercolor, and caffeine is a big part of my life. And looking at this just reminds me of waking up in the mornings with your cup of coffee and having the sunrise come in. Just brings happiness. So there is a technique called wet on wet with watercolor, and I watched a little tutorial on how to do this, and I ended up painting my cat, Dr. Chocolate, that had passed away, and he was a big part in my life, and I really missed him. So when I painted this, I knew I would enjoy having it around because I told my husband now I can see him every day again. And that is kind of what art does for you, is it surrounds you with those images that you want to have in your life, that you want to see, or of people or pets that have passed, or places you've been that you want to experience again. Okay, this is probably my most detailed piece that I did, and I watched a tutorial on this, and it said easy watercolor tutorial, and I gotta tell you, for my skill level at least, it was not easy, so I started just turning it into my own. And there are a lot of rough edges, but this really did bring me some confidence. I've still got a long way to go on watercolor technique, but it's still a long way from the crayon scribble in the beginning of the class. And this reminds me of the scenery on the many, many hikes that my family and I love to do. We're big lovers of nature. And so this is just very characteristic of the things we truly, truly enjoy, which is nature. Okay, I explained I was, you know, really kind of a nerd for space and galaxies, so I decided to try a tutorial on galaxies using watercolor. And in in theory, it is probably one of the easier things you could do with watercolor, but I still have some work to go on blending. Yet ultimately, I was happy with this, and really doing galaxies does go back to where I said I wanted to bring the larger world that's outside inside my home. After doing the tutorial, I decided to try one on my own. I just created my own galaxy using the colors that I was happy with, and I think it came out pretty good. And this last painting just really brings me happiness, thinking about where I started and where I came from, the fear of watercolor, starting with just the scribbled lines and then coming here. And this picture to me is proof of my confidence coming back as an artist. So those are my images, and through this class and through this project, I would say that I feel that I've tackled my fears of painting, and certainly I've created images that will surround my family and myself with joy. And something I have never been able to say when it came to artwork is that I feel what I have gained from this is I can call myself an artist, and I am an artist.